The telegram, trembling in Josephine Carter's hands, promised a new life in Oklahoma Territory. But watching her younger sister, Clara, cough blood into a handkerchief on the train platform made her question everything she had done. The year was 1893, and they were standing in Enid, a town barely 3 years old, carved out of the Cherokee Outlet after the land run. Dust swirled around their worn traveling dresses, and the September heat pressed down like a heavy blanket despite the late afternoon hour. "I can manage, Joe," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the departing train. At 19, she looked more like a fragile child, her frame too thin, her skin too pale. The consumption had taken hold 6 months ago, right after their mother died, and it showed no signs of loosening its grip. Josephine was 23, old enough to understand the gravity of what she had done, but young enough to still hope for miracles. She had answered an advertisement from Caleb Quinn, a rancher seeking a wife. The letters they exchanged over 3 months had been practical, businesslike. He needed help running his ranch. She needed security and a fresh start. Neither had mentioned love, and she had certainly never mentioned having a dying sister. "Miss Carter." The deep voice came from behind them, and Josephine turned to see a man approaching. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a startling green, made more vivid by the contrast with his tanned face. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, which he removed as he drew near. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 28 or 29, with the lean, muscled build of someone who worked hard every day of his life. "Mr. Quinn." Josephine's throat felt dry. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times during the 5-day journey from Philadelphia, but none of her imaginings had included Clara's obvious illness or the guilt that now ate at her insides. "Yes, madam." His gaze moved from Josephine to Clara, and she saw his expression shift from welcoming to concerned. "Is this your sister? I am so sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I should have told you in my letters, but I was afraid. Clara is ill, very ill, and she has no one else. I could not leave her behind. If you want to send us back, I will understand. I have enough money for the return tickets if we travel second class, though it took nearly everything I had to get us here. I know this is not what you expected, and I apologize for the deception." Caleb Quinn looked at both of them for a long moment, his green eyes unreadable. Then he bent down and picked up both of their travel bags as if they weighed nothing. "Got a wagon just over there. Let us get your sister out of this sun." Josephine stared at him. "You mean you are not sending us away?" I said I needed help at the ranch. He started walking toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. Did not specify how many helpers. He glanced back at them. "Coming." Clara swayed slightly, and Josephine wrapped an arm around her waist. They followed Caleb to the wagon, where he had already stowed their bags. He turned and, without asking permission, lifted Clara as if she weighed no more than a child and settled her gently onto the wagon bed, which he had lined with blankets. "More comfortable back here than the bench," he said. "Miss Carter, you can ride up front with me, or you can stay back there with your sister. Your choice." "I will stay with Clara." Josephine climbed into the wagon bed and cradled her sister's head in her lap. She felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall. This man, this stranger who owed them nothing, was showing them more kindness than anyone had in months. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour. Caleb drove in silence, occasionally glancing back to check on them. The landscape was different from anything Josephine had seen before, vast and open, with rolling hills covered in prairie grass that rippled like water in the wind. They passed a few scattered homesteads, small wooden houses that looked lonely against the endless sky. "How long have you had the ranch?" Josephine finally asked, needing to break the silence. "Came out in the run of 1893, staked my claim in September." Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Been building it up since then. Got about 160 acres, 30 head of cattle, a dozen horses. House is not fancy, but it is solid. Built most of it myself." "You participated in the land run?" Clara asked, her voice gaining a bit of strength from curiosity. "What was it like?" Caleb smiled slightly, the first real expression Josephine had seen on his face. "Chaos. Pure chaos." 50,000 people lined up at noon on September 16th, waiting for the cannon shot. When it came, everyone just went wild, racing to claim the best plots. I rode hard and got lucky, found good land with a creek running through it. Some folks were not so fortunate. "Do you run the ranch alone?" Josephine asked. "Got 2 hands who help out. Sam is an older fellow, maybe 60, knows more about cattle than anyone I have ever met. Young Tom is about 20, still learning but a hard worker. They bunk in the barn." He paused. "The house has 3 bedrooms. I figured I would take the smallest one, give you the larger ones. Your sister will need the room with the best light and ventilation." Josephine felt her throat tighten again. "Mr. Quinn, I do not know how to thank you. No need for thanks." His voice was gruff. "And you might as well call me Caleb. We are going to be married after all." He said it matter-of-factly, as if they were discussing the weather. "Unless you have changed your mind given the circumstances." "I have not changed my mind." Josephine surprised herself with how quickly she answered. "Have you?" "No, madam." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. The house was larger than Josephine had expected, a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. There was a barn, a chicken coop, and several other outbuildings. The creek Caleb had mentioned sparkled in the late afternoon sun, lined with cottonwood trees that provided shade. It was more beautiful than anything she had imagined. Caleb brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and immediately went to lift Clara again. "Let me show you to your room. You need rest." Inside, the house was simple but well maintained. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Caleb carried Clara through a doorway into a bedroom that faced east. The bed was covered with a colorful quilt, and white curtains hung at the window. "I will bring in your bags," Caleb said. "There is a pump out back for water. Supper will be ready in about an hour if you are hungry." After he left, Josephine helped Clara out of her traveling dress and into a nightgown. Her sister's breathing was labored and she looked exhausted. "He seems kind," Clara whispered as Josephine tucked the quilt around her. "I was so frightened he would turn us away." "So was I." Josephine smoothed Clara's damp hair back from her forehead. "Rest now. We are safe here." She left Clara sleeping and found Caleb in the kitchen, cutting vegetables with practiced efficiency. He had removed his hat, and his hair was indeed as wavy as she had thought. There were calluses on his hands, and a scar ran along his left forearm, pale against his tanned skin. "Can I help?" Josephine asked. "Can you cook?" "Yes, my mother taught me well." "Then you can take over." He stepped back from the counter. "I am a decent cook, but I would not call it a talent. The chicken is already roasting. Just needs vegetables and biscuits to go with it." They worked in companionable silence. Josephine found the kitchen well stocked and organized. She made biscuits from scratch and prepared the vegetables while Caleb set the table. 2 older men came in as she was pulling the biscuits from the oven, and Caleb introduced them as Sam and Tom. Sam was indeed around 60, with a weathered face and kind blue eyes. Tom was younger, with red hair and freckles covering every visible inch of skin. Both men removed their hats respectfully when they saw Josephine. "Pleased to meet you, madam," Sam said. Caleb told us you were coming. Welcome to the ranch. Thank you. Josephine felt herself relaxing slightly. I hope you like biscuits. If they taste half as good as they smell, we will love them, Tom said, earning an elbow from Sam. Mind your manners, boy. They ate at the large wooden table, and Josephine took a plate to Clara, who managed to eat a little before falling back asleep. When she returned, the men were discussing plans for the next day. Caleb caught her eye and gestured to the chair next to him. We need to talk about arrangements, he said after Sam and Tom had left. I want to marry you properly with a preacher and everything legal. But given your sister's health, I understand if you want to wait. There is no rush from my end. You and Clara are welcome here regardless. Josephine met his steady gaze. I will marry you whenever you wish. You have been nothing but generous and kind, and I will hold up my end of our agreement. This is not just about the agreement anymore. Caleb leaned back in his chair. I will not hold you to anything if your heart is not in it. You have enough to worry about with Clara. My heart is in it. Josephine realized as she said it that it was true. She barely knew this man, but something about his quiet strength and unexpected compassion drew her to him. I came here to start a new life, to build something good. I still want that. All right then, Caleb nodded. I will ride into town tomorrow and speak with Reverend Matthews. We can do it simple, just us and a few witnesses. Does that suit you? That suits me fine. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Enid. Josephine wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, which were also blue, though a lighter shade than the fabric. Clara insisted on attending despite her weakness, and Tom drove the wagon slowly to minimize the jostling. Sam and his wife Martha, who lived on a neighboring homestead, served as witnesses. Reverend Matthews was a round man with a jovial face who seemed genuinely pleased to be performing the ceremony. He kept it brief, as Caleb had requested, but his words about love and commitment and building a life together resonated in Josephine's heart. When Caleb kissed her to seal their vows, it was chaste and quick, but Josephine felt warmth spread through her chest. His lips were soft, and he smelled of soap and leather. For a moment, she let herself believe that this could become something real, something more than a practical arrangement. They returned to the ranch as man and wife. Clara had exhausted herself with the trip and went straight to bed. Josephine found herself alone with Caleb for the first time since they had spoken their vows. I will sleep in the small bedroom, Caleb said, not meeting her eyes. No expectations. We can take our time getting to know each other. You are a good man, Caleb Quinn. Josephine stepped closer and touched his arm lightly. Thank you for everything. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. I want you to be happy here, Josephine, both of you. I think we will be. The days fell into a rhythm. Josephine woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the men before they went out to work the ranch. She tended to Clara, who had good days and bad days, the latter becoming more frequent as September turned to October. She learned to bake bread, to preserve vegetables, to churn butter, to do all the things required to keep a household running. Caleb was patient and respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They talked during meals, sharing stories about their pasts. She learned that he had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 sons. His father had been a farmer who drank too much and hit too hard. Caleb had left home at 16 and worked various jobs, saving every penny until he could participate in the land run and claim his own piece of earth. I wanted something that was mine, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clara was sleeping and the ranch hands had retired to the barn. Something no one could take away from me. This land, this ranch, it is my fresh start. I understand that. Josephine pulled her shawl tighter against the cooling air. That is what I wanted too. What Clara needs. She should have had a long life ahead of her, marriage and children and happiness. Instead, she got consumption and a sister who dragged her across the country. You did not drag her. You saved her. Caleb turned to look at her. Back in Philadelphia with no money and no prospects, what kind of care could you have given her? At least here she has fresh air, good food, and a place to rest. But she is getting worse. Josephine felt tears slip down her cheeks. I can see it every day. She barely eats. The coughing fits last longer. I am going to lose her, Caleb, and I do not know how to accept that. Caleb reached over and took her hand, the first truly intimate gesture he had made since their wedding. His hand was rough and warm, and she clung to it like a lifeline. Then we will make sure her remaining days are as good as we can make them, he said quietly. We will give her every comfort, every kindness, and we will be there for her together. Together, Josephine repeated, and the word felt like a promise. Clara had a good spell in early October, a week where she seemed almost herself again. She sat on the porch in the afternoon sun, reading books that Martha had brought over. She laughed at Tom's clumsy attempts to court a girl in town. She even helped Josephine snap green beans one afternoon, her thin fingers working slowly but steadily. You love him, Clara said during one of these sessions. It was not a question. Josephine felt her face heat. We barely know each other. That does not answer what I said. Clara gave her a knowing look. I see the way you watch him when he comes in from the fields, the way your face lights up when he talks to you, the way you have started touching his shoulder when you set his dinner plate down. I suppose I am starting to care for him, Josephine admitted. More than I expected. He is nothing like the men back home, Clara. He is genuine and hardworking and kind. He treats me like an equal, not a possession, and he has been so good to you. He is good to me because he loves you, Clara said simply. Anyone with eyes can see it. The way he looks at you when you are not watching, it is like you hung the moon. Do you really think so? Josephine felt hope flutter in her chest. I know so. Clara reached over and squeezed her hand. Joe, I need you to promise me something. When I am gone, you will let yourself be happy with him. You will not spend your life mourning me. You will build the life you deserve. Do not talk like that. We both know the truth. Clara's voice was gentle but firm. I am not getting better. The good days are becoming fewer. I do not have much time left, and I need to know that you will be all right. Josephine felt her throat close with emotion. I promise, but you have to promise to fight, to hold on as long as you can. I will fight. Clara smiled. I want to see you truly happy first. I want to know that you have found your place. That night, Josephine knocked softly on Caleb's door. When he opened it, wearing only his trousers and an undershirt, she saw surprise in his green eyes. Is something wrong? Is Clara all right? Clara is sleeping. I wanted to talk to you. She twisted her hands together nervously. May I come in? He stepped back to let her enter. The room was small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and a chest of drawers. It felt wrong that he had given up the larger rooms for her and Clara. Caleb, I want us to have a real marriage. The words came out in a rush. I know we started this as an arrangement, but I have come to care for you deeply. I think about you all day when you are working. I look forward to our evenings together. When you hold my hand, I feel safe and cherished. I want more. I want us to truly be husband and wife in every way. Caleb stared at her for a long moment, and she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Then he crossed the space between them in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. Josephine, I have been half in love with you since you stepped off that train looking so brave and so scared all at once. His voice was rough with emotion. I did not push because I wanted you to come to me when you were ready, if you ever were. Are you sure this is what you want? I have never been more sure of anything. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her feelings into it. He responded immediately, deepening the kiss, his arms coming around her to pull her close. She could feel the hard planes of his body against hers, the strength in his embrace tempered by gentleness. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand and leading her to her bedroom. "If we are going to do this, we will do it properly, in a real bed, not that cot I have been sleeping on." They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies and responses. Caleb was patient and attentive, making sure she was ready before taking his own pleasure. Afterward they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers running through her hair. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Josephine Quinn. I love you too." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Thank you for giving me and Clara a home. Thank you for being the man you are. Thank you for taking a chance on a rancher you had never met." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Best decision I ever made, putting that advertisement in the paper." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, Josephine felt completely at peace. Clara's health declined rapidly after that. By late October, she could no longer leave her bed. Josephine spent hours at her side, reading to her, singing the songs their mother used to sing. Caleb hired a doctor from Enid to examine her, but there was little to be done. The consumption had progressed too far. "Keep her comfortable," the doctor said quietly. "Give her morphine if the pain becomes too severe, and prepare yourself. It will not be long now." Caleb moved a rocking chair into Clara's room so Josephine could rest without leaving her sister's side. He brought meals on trays and insisted she eat. He sat with Clara when Josephine needed to sleep, reading to her in his deep, steady voice. One evening in early November, Clara woke from a doze and looked around the room with surprising clarity. Josephine was at her side immediately, taking her hand. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Clara whispered. "But peaceful. Joe, I need to tell you something while I still can. Anything. You made the right choice coming here, marrying Caleb." Clara's breathing was labored, but her eyes were bright. "I have seen you bloom like a flower in sunshine these past weeks. You are happy, truly happy for the first time in years. Promise me you will hold on to that happiness. Promise me you will build a beautiful life with him. I promise." Tears streamed down Josephine's face. "I love you so much, Clara. I love you too. You have been the best sister anyone could ask for." Clara's eyes drifted closed. "I am ready now. I am not afraid." Josephine called for Caleb, and he came immediately, settling into the chair on the other side of the bed. Together, they kept vigil through the night. Clara slipped away just before dawn, so peacefully that for a moment Josephine thought she was simply sleeping. "She is gone," Caleb said softly, reaching across the bed to take Josephine's hand. "She is at peace now." Josephine wept, great racking sobs that shook her entire body. Caleb came around the bed and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she grieved. When the storm of tears finally passed, she pulled back and looked up at him. "She made me promise to be happy," she said. "She said that is what she wanted for me. Then we will honor that promise." Caleb kissed her forehead. "We will grieve her, but we will also celebrate the life we are building. That is what she wanted." They buried Clara on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree that would shade her grave in the summer. Reverend Matthews said words of comfort, and Martha brought flowers despite the late season. Sam and Tom stood with their hats in their hands, paying respect to a young woman they had barely known but who had touched their hearts. Josephine cried through the entire service, but they were clean tears, the kind that brought catharsis rather than despair. Caleb stood beside her, solid and steadfast, his hand holding hers tightly. After everyone left, she stayed at the grave alone for a while, talking to Clara as if she could still hear. "I will keep my promise," she said. "I will be happy. I will love Caleb with everything in me, and I will build a good life here. Thank you for being my sister, for being brave through everything. Rest now. You have earned it." The winter was hard, as winters on the Oklahoma prairie always were. The wind howled across the plains, driving snow before it. The cattle needed constant care, and several times Caleb and the hands had to ride out in dangerous conditions to check on the herd. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth. Josephine threw herself into being a good wife, learning all the skills she needed to thrive in this new life. She cooked and cleaned, tended the chickens, learned to preserve food for the lean months. When Caleb came in from the cold, she had hot coffee and a warm meal waiting. More than that, she gave him her heart fully. They talked late into the night, sharing dreams and fears. They made love with increasing passion and tenderness, learning what brought each other pleasure. They laughed together, worked together, built their life together. "I want to expand the ranch," Caleb told her one evening in January as they sat by the fire. "Maybe double the herd, bring in some better breeding stock. It will mean a few lean years while we invest, but in the long run it will pay off. Then we will do it." Josephine set down her mending. "I trust your judgment, Caleb. This is your dream, and I want to help you achieve it." "It is our dream now." He pulled her into his lap, nuzzling her neck. "Everything I do for us, for the future we are building." Speaking of the future, Josephine felt her heart beat faster. She had been waiting for the right moment to tell him, and this felt like it. "I think we might be expecting a child." Caleb froze, then pulled back to look at her face. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. I have missed my monthly time twice now, and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased," he laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed her soundly. "Josephine, I am more than pleased, I am thrilled. A baby, our baby." He placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "When? Late summer, I think. August or September. We will need to set up a nursery. And get a cradle. Sam is good at woodworking, maybe he can make one." Caleb was already planning, his eyes bright with excitement. "And we should get the doctor to check on you regularly. I want to make sure you and the baby stay healthy." "I am healthy as a horse," Josephine assured him, touched by his concern. "But yes, we can see the doctor." "I love you," Caleb said, kissing her again. "Thank you for this gift. I love you too. We made this baby together out of love. That makes it even more special." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Josephine bloomed, her face glowing with health and happiness. Caleb was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. She found his concern endearing, even when it was excessive. Spring came, and with it new life all over the ranch. Calves were born, wobbly-legged and adorable. The chickens produced more eggs. The prairie burst into bloom with wildflowers in every color imaginable. Josephine walked through the fields with Caleb in the evenings, marveling at the beauty of their land. "I visited Clara's grave today," she told him during one of these walks. "I told her about the baby. I think she would be happy for us." "I know she would be." Caleb wrapped an arm around her expanding waist. "She wanted you to be happy, and you are. That is all she could have asked for. I miss her, but it does not hurt quite so much anymore." Josephine leaned into his embrace. "The grief has softened into something I can live with. I can remember her with love instead of pain. That is good. That is healthy." He kissed the top of her head. "She will never be forgotten. We will tell our children about her, about how brave and kind she was." In June, Martha insisted on throwing a celebration for Josephine and the coming baby. Women from neighboring ranches and homesteads gathered at the Quinn Ranch, bringing gifts they had made themselves. There were tiny gowns and soft blankets, booties and bonnets, all lovingly crafted. Josephine was overwhelmed by their generosity. "This is what community means out here," Martha explained. "We take care of each other. When you need help, everyone shows up. When someone else needs help, you show up for them. That is how we survive. I am starting to understand that." Josephine looked around at the women chatting and laughing in her home. "I was so lonely back in Philadelphia after my mother died. I felt like Clara and I were completely alone in the world. But here, I feel like I belong." "You do belong." Martha squeezed her hand. "You are one of us now." The baby came on a scorching August day, arriving after 16 hours of labor that left Josephine exhausted, but elated. Dr. Morrison, who had ridden out from Enid at Caleb's frantic summons, declared it a textbook delivery. "You have a healthy son, Mrs. Quinn," he said, placing the squalling infant in her arms. 8 pounds if he is an ounce, with a fine set of lungs." Josephine looked down at her son, at his red, wrinkled face and shock of dark hair, and fell instantly in love. When Caleb came into the room, his face was pale with worry. "Are you all right? Is the baby all right?" "We are both fine." Josephine held out the bundle. "Come meet your son." Caleb approached slowly, almost reverently. When he took the baby, his large, work-roughened hands were infinitely gentle. He stared down at the tiny face, and Josephine saw tears in his eyes. "He is perfect," Caleb whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her husband holding their son, Josephine knew exactly what the baby should be called. "Carter," she said. "Carter Quinn, after my maiden name. So that he carries a piece of my family with him, along with yours." Caleb looked up at her, understanding in his eyes. "Carter Quinn, I like it. Clara would have liked it too. I think she would have loved it. Life with a newborn was exhausting but wonderful." Carter was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and his mother's delicate features. Caleb was a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring the baby to Josephine for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Carter when he was fussy. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love him," Caleb said one night as they watched their son sleep in the cradle Sam had indeed carved for them. "Except for you, of course." "Of course." Josephine smiled. "You are a wonderful father, Caleb, better than I ever dreamed." "I want to be better than my father was," he said quietly. "I want Carter to grow up knowing he is loved and valued. I want him to feel safe in his own home. He will. We will make sure of it." The first year of Carter's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Caleb's gamble on better breeding stock paid off, and they were able to sell their cattle for premium prices. They hired an additional hand, a young man named Jake, who had just come west seeking his fortune. Josephine divided her time between caring for Carter and managing the household, which had grown more complex as the ranch expanded. She learned to keep accounts, to manage inventory, to make decisions about purchases and sales. Caleb trusted her judgment completely, often consulting with her before making major decisions. "We are partners in this," he told her. "Your opinion matters as much as mine." On their second wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised her with a gift. When she unwrapped it, she found a beautiful leather-bound journal, her initials embossed on the cover in gold. "For recording our family history," he explained, "so that Carter and any other children we have will know where they came from, what we built here." Josephine began writing that night, documenting their journey from her arrival in Enid with Clara to the thriving life they had created. She wrote about the ranch, about the land run, about the challenges and triumphs. Most of all, she wrote about love, the unexpected, powerful love that had grown between a mail-order bride and a lonely rancher. Carter's first birthday was celebrated with a gathering of friends and neighbors. The now 1-year-old smashed his face into a cake Josephine had baked, making everyone laugh. Caleb took dozens of photographs with a camera he had purchased in town, wanting to preserve every moment. "I want to remember this," he said to Josephine as they watched their son play with the wooden toys Sam had carved. "This perfect day, this perfect life we have created. Every day is perfect when I am with you," Josephine said, meaning it with her whole heart. That night, after the guests had gone and Carter was asleep, they made love with the passionate familiarity of people who knew each other's bodies intimately. Afterward, lying in Caleb's arms, Josephine felt completely content. "I have something to tell you," she said. "What is it?" "I am expecting again. Due in the spring, I think." Caleb's whoop of joy woke Carter, and they spent the next hour settling him back to sleep while laughing at themselves, but neither could stop smiling. Their daughter was born in April 1896, a beautiful spring day when the prairie was covered with wildflowers. The labor was faster this time, only 8 hours, and the baby arrived squalling her indignation at being forced into the world. "Another healthy baby," Dr. Morrison announced. "A girl this time, about 7 pounds. They named her Clara Rose, Rose for new beginnings and Clara for the beloved sister who had not lived to see the life Josephine had built. When Josephine held her daughter for the first time, she cried tears of joy and sorrow mixed together. "I wish Clara could have met her namesake," she said to Caleb. "I think she knows." Caleb touched his daughter's tiny hand. "Somehow, I think she knows and approves." With 2 children, the house felt full and alive. Carter, now 2, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. Josephine learned to manage a household that included 2 babies, a husband, and frequently the ranch hands who came in for meals. She was busier than she had ever been in her life, but she had never been happier. Every morning she woke beside the man she loved in a home they had built together, surrounded by family. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1897, they had expanded to 300 acres, purchasing adjacent land from a homesteader who had decided to return east. The herd had grown to over 100 head of cattle, and they had established a reputation for quality stock. Caleb was considered one of the most successful ranchers in the area, and Josephine was known as a woman who could outwork most men when necessary. But their greatest success was their marriage. 4 years after their wedding, they were more in love than ever. They still talked late into the night, still made love with passion, still found joy in each other's company. They had built exactly what they had both dreamed of: a partnership, a family, a life worth living. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Carter and Clara played in the yard, Caleb turned to Josephine. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming out here, taking a chance on a stranger?" "Never." Josephine took his hand. "This is exactly where I am supposed to be, with you, with our children on this land. Everything that happened, even losing Clara, led me to this moment. I would not change any of it." "I used to dream about having a family," Caleb said quietly. "A real family, not like the one I grew up in. I dreamed of a home filled with love and laughter. You have given me that, Josephine. You have given me everything. We have given it to each other." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "That is what marriage is supposed to be, is it not? 2 people building something beautiful together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play and the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and full of promise, just like their future. In the spring of 1898, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with excitement from Carter and Clara, who were now old enough to understand that they would have a new brother or sister. "I hope it is a brother," Carter said decisively. He was 4 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of inheriting his father's build. "Sisters are all right, but a brother would be better for playing horses." "I want a sister," Clara countered. She was 2 with blonde curls and her mother's blue eyes. "Brothers are too rough." "You will love the baby regardless," Josephine told them, hiding a smile. The pregnancy was more difficult than her previous 2. Josephine was often tired and suffered from persistent nausea that lasted well into her 4th month. Caleb was worried, insisting she rest more and hiring a woman from town to come help with the housework and children. "I am not made of glass," Josephine protested, even as she accepted the help gratefully. "No, but you are carrying our child, and that makes you precious." Caleb kissed her forehead. "Let others help. That is what community is for." The baby, another son they named Samuel Caleb Quinn after Sam, who had become like family to them, was born in December during a snowstorm. It was a difficult birth, longer and harder than the previous 2, and Dr. Morrison was frank with them afterward. "No more children," he said firmly. "Mrs. Quinn's body has been through enough. Another pregnancy could be dangerous, even fatal." Caleb went pale at the doctor's words, and that night, after the children were asleep and baby Samuel was settled in his cradle, he held Josephine close. "We have been blessed with 3 healthy children," he said. "That is more than enough. I will not risk losing you for another baby. You mean too much to me." "I agree." Josephine was tired to her bones but content. 3 is a good number. "A houseful, but not so many we cannot give each of them the attention they deserve." "I love you, Josephine Quinn." Caleb's voice was fierce. "More than anything in this world, you and our children, you are my everything. And you are mine." As baby Samuel grew, the Quinn household settled into a new rhythm. Carter was now old enough to help his father with small ranch tasks, learning to ride and rope under Caleb's patient tutelage. Clara was the ranch's darling, charming everyone with her sunny disposition and ready laughter. Samuel was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with solemn eyes. Josephine managed the expanding household with skill born of practice. She kept the accounts, managed supplies, directed the hired help, and still found time to be a present mother to her children. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, she and Caleb would sit together, talking about their days, making plans for the future. "I want to build a school," Caleb said one night. It was early 1899, and they were celebrating the new year quietly at home. "There are enough families in the area now that we could support one. Carter is getting old enough to need formal education, and in a few years, Clara and Samuel will too." "That is a wonderful idea." Josephine felt pride swell in her chest. Her husband, the man who had grown up poor and uneducated, wanted to provide opportunities for all the children in the area. "How would we go about it?" "Talk to the other ranchers and homesteaders, see if they would contribute. Maybe we could build it on the edge of our property, near the main road. That way, it would be accessible to everyone." Caleb's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "We would need to hire a teacher, probably someone from back east who is willing to come out here." "Like a mail-order teacher," Josephine said with a smile. "That worked out well for you before. Best decision I ever made." Caleb pulled her into his lap. "Though I will admit I got far more than I expected. I thought I was getting a housekeeper and cook. Instead, I got a partner, a lover, a best friend. I got everything." They kissed long and deep, and Josephine felt the familiar heat bloom in her belly. Even after 6 years of marriage, her desire for him had not diminished. the school project became a reality over the next year. Caleb rallied the community, and with combined resources and labor, they built a sturdy one-room schoolhouse. They hired a young woman named Emily Winters from Boston, who arrived in Enid in the fall of 1899, ready to educate the children of the Oklahoma Territory. Carter started school that September, and Josephine felt tears prick her eyes as she watched him ride off with his father on his first day. Her baby boy was growing up. "He will be fine," Caleb assured her, though his own voice was thick with emotion. "He is a smart boy, eager to learn." "I know. It is just hard, seeing him become more independent." She wiped at her eyes. "Soon they will all be grown and will not need me anymore. They will always need you. I will always need you." Caleb wrapped his arms around her. "You are the heart of this family, Josephine. We would be lost without you." The new century arrived with celebration and hope. On January 1st, 1900, the Quinn family gathered with friends and neighbors to mark the occasion. Toasts were raised, songs were sung, and promises were made for the bright future ahead. 20 years ago, this land was open prairie, Sam said, his voice carrying across the gathering. Now, look at what we have built. Homes, ranches, a school, a community. We have created something lasting here, something good. Josephine looked around at the faces gathered in her home. These people, who had been strangers just a few years ago, had become family. They had helped each other through hard times, celebrated good times, and built a community that would endure. "I want to make a toast," she said, rising to her feet. Caleb looked at her with love and pride. "To new beginnings. 7 years ago, I arrived in Enid, a frightened woman with a dying sister and no prospects. I took a chance on a stranger, and he gave me a home, a family, and a life beyond my wildest dreams. To taking chances, to building dreams, and to the power of love to transform everything it touches." "Hear, hear!" The room echoed with agreement, glasses raised high. That night, alone with Caleb in their bedroom, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "Do you remember the day I arrived?" she asked, lying in his arms. "Every detail." Caleb's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "You looked exhausted and terrified, but also determined. Clara looked like a strong wind could blow her away. I remember thinking you were either very brave or very desperate to have come so far with your sister in that condition." "Both," Josephine admitted. "I was terrified you would send us away. When you said there was room for both of us, I could barely believe it. Why did you? You could have easily told me to go back." "I do not know exactly." Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Something about the way you stood there, defiant and apologetic at the same time, ready to fight for your sister even though you knew you had no right to ask. It spoke to me. Plus, Clara looked so sick and you looked so desperate. What kind of man would I be if I had turned you away? A man protecting his own interests." Josephine turned to look at him. "Many would have done exactly that. Then I am glad I am not like many." He kissed her softly. "Everything I have, everything I am, started the day you stepped off that train. You brought life and love to this ranch, Josephine. You made it a home. We made it a home together." As the years passed, the Quinn Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the territory. When Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, Caleb and Josephine celebrated with their children, now growing into fine young people. Carter, at 13, was already as tall as his father and showed every sign of becoming an excellent rancher. Clara, at 11, was beautiful and intelligent, helping her mother manage the increasingly complex household. Samuel, at 9, was quiet and thoughtful, showing an aptitude for figures that suggested he might become the family bookkeeper one day. The schoolhouse they had built had grown into a proper school, with 2 teachers and students from families spread across miles of prairie. The community had grown as well, with new homesteaders arriving regularly, drawn by the promise of good land and honest opportunity. Josephine kept her journal faithfully, recording the milestones of their family life. She wrote about Carter's first successful cattle drive at 15, about Clara's first dance at 14, about Samuel's decision to pursue advanced education when he was old enough. She wrote about the challenges, droughts that tested their resources, harsh winters that took livestock, the constant work required to maintain and grow the ranch. But mostly, she wrote about love. The enduring, deepening love between her and Caleb, which had only grown stronger with time and tribulation. The love they poured into their children, raising them to be honest, hardworking, and kind. The love of community, neighbors helping neighbors, building something lasting together. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1908, Caleb surprised Josephine with a trip to Guthrie, the capital of the newly formed state of Oklahoma. They left the children with Martha and Sam and spent 3 days alone together, something they had not done since the early days of their marriage. "This is lovely," Josephine said as they walked through the streets of the bustling city. "But I find myself missing the ranch, missing the children." "Me too." Caleb squeezed her hand. "That is how you know you have built a good life, when you cannot wait to get back to it." They returned home to find the children had prepared a celebration, with Clara having baked a cake under Martha's supervision, and Carter having organized a gathering of friends and family. The house was full of laughter and love, exactly as it should be. That night, sitting on their porch as they had done countless times before, Josephine and Caleb watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I come out here sometimes and think about that first night you arrived," Caleb said. "How I almost lost my nerve and sent a telegram telling you not to come. How close I came to missing out on everything we have built." "What stopped you?" Josephine had never heard this before. "Sam, actually. He asked me what I was so afraid of. Was I afraid of being happy? Was I afraid of opening my heart to someone? He told me that fortune favors the brave, that I would never know what I was missing if I did not take the chance." Caleb chuckled. "He was right, as he usually is. Remind me to thank him tomorrow." Josephine leaned into her husband's embrace. "For talking sense into you." "Every day, I thank whatever force of fate brought you to me," Caleb said. "You and Clara stepping off that train into my life. I got to know Clara for such a short time, but she gave me you, and that is the greatest gift I have ever received. She would be so proud of what we have built." Josephine looked out over the ranch at the home they had created, the family they had raised. "She would love Carter and Clara and Samuel. She would love seeing how far we have come. I think she knows." Caleb touched the small locket Josephine always wore, which contained a tiny photograph of Clara. "Somehow, I think she has been watching over us all along." As their children grew into young adults, Caleb and Josephine began to think about the future of the ranch. Carter was nearly a man now, at 18, and showed every interest in taking over the family business one day. Clara, at 16, was being courted by the son of a neighboring rancher, a fine young man who treated her with respect and kindness. Samuel, at 14, had announced his intention to study law, wanting to help ensure fair treatment for farmers and ranchers. "They are all so different," Josephine said to Caleb one evening in 1913. "But each one is exactly who they are meant to be. We have done well, husband." "We have," Caleb agreed. He was now 48, with silver threading through his dark hair, but he was still strong and vital, still running the ranch with skill and determination. "They are good people, all three of them. They will make their mark on the world, just as we have made ours." Carter married 2 years later, bringing his bride home to the ranch. Caleb and Josephine built them a small house on the property, close enough to be part of the family operation but far enough to give them privacy. Clara married the following year, moving to her husband's ranch about 10 miles away. Samuel left for university, determined to get his law degree. With the nest emptying, Caleb and Josephine found themselves alone together more than they had been in years. Rather than feeling sad, they reveled in the renewed intimacy, rediscovering each other without the constant demands of parenthood. "I love our children," Caleb said one night as they lay in bed, "but I confess, I have missed having you to myself." "I feel the same." Josephine traced the lines of his face, noting the changes time had wrought. He was no longer the young man who had met her at the train station, but to her, he had only grown more handsome with age. "We have devoted so much of ourselves to building the ranch, raising the children. It is nice to just be us again." They traveled more, taking trips they had always talked about but never had time for. They visited Samuel at university, proud beyond measure when he graduated at the top of his class. They attended Carter's children's births, becoming grandparents to 3 beautiful grandchildren. They danced at Clara's anniversary celebrations and hosted gatherings that brought the whole extended family together. In 1920, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Caleb took Josephine back to the exact spot where he had first seen her, the train platform in Enid. "27 years ago, I came to this platform not knowing if I was making the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "I was so nervous, I almost turned around and left before the train arrived. I am glad you did not." Josephine looked around at the town that had grown up around them. Enid was no longer the rough frontier town it had been. It had paved streets now, electric lights, automobiles instead of just horses and wagons. But the platform was still there, weathered but standing. "I stood here with Clara, so frightened I could barely breathe, knowing I was deceiving you but not seeing any other choice. When you said there was room for both of us, I fell a little bit in love with you right then." "Just a little," Caleb teased. "All right, maybe more than a little." She smiled up at him. "Caleb Quinn, you have given me a wonderful life. You took in a desperate woman and her dying sister, and you gave us a home. You gave me love, respect, partnership. You gave me children and a life beyond anything I had dreamed possible. Thank you. Josephine Quinn, you saved me." Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions of building a ranch but never really living. You brought life and love and joy. You turned a house into a home, a ranch into a legacy. I am the one who should be thanking you." They kissed on that platform, middle-aged and married nearly 3 decades, but their love as fresh and vital as it had been on their wedding day. The years continued to pass. The ranch prospered under Carter's increasingly skilled management, with Caleb transitioning into an advisory role. Their family grew with more grandchildren, and eventually, even a few great-grandchildren. The community they had helped build continued to thrive, with the school they had founded expanding into a full educational complex. On Josephine's 60th birthday in 1933, the family gathered for a massive celebration. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren filled the house and spilled out onto the porch and yard. Looking around at all of them, Josephine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A speech. Carter called out and the crowd took up the call. Josephine stood with Caleb beside her, his hand steady on her elbow. She looked out at the sea of faces, each one precious to her. 40 years ago, she began, I stepped off a train in this town with my dying sister, not knowing what the future held. I was terrified and desperate, taking a chance on a stranger because I had nowhere else to turn. That stranger became my husband, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. She smiled at Caleb, who was looking at her with undisguised adoration. Together, we built this ranch, this family, this community. We faced challenges and celebrated triumphs. We lost people we loved and welcomed new life. Through it all, we had each other. She paused, her eyes finding each of her children in turn. To Carter, Clara, and Samuel, you are my greatest accomplishment. You are proof that love, hard work, and determination can build something lasting. You have taken what your father and I started and made it even better. I could not be prouder. Her gaze swept over the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. To all of you, remember where you came from. Remember that this ranch, this family, was built by people who took chances, who worked hard, who loved deeply. Carry that legacy forward. Make your mark on the world, but never forget the foundation your family has given you. She turned to Caleb, tears streaming down her face. And to my husband, thank you for 40 years of love. Thank you for taking in a desperate mail-order bride and her sick sister. Thank you for building this life with me. You are, and always will be, the best decision I ever made. The gathering erupted in applause and cheers. Caleb pulled Josephine into his arms and kissed her, not caring that they had an audience. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and smiling at once. Later that night, alone in the house that had been their home for 4 decades, Caleb and Josephine sat on their porch one more time, watching the stars as they had done countless times before. "You have any regrets?" Caleb asked. "Only one." Josephine was quiet for a moment. "I wish Clara could have seen all of this. I wish she could have known the family we created, the life we built. I wish she could have had her own chance at happiness." She did have happiness in her own way. Caleb took her hand. She got to see you find love. She got to know that her sacrifice, leaving Philadelphia and coming here with you, led to something beautiful. She died knowing you would be all right. That is not nothing, Josephine. That is everything. You are right. Josephine squeezed his hand. "As you usually are." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had loved each other for so long that words were often unnecessary. The prairie stretched out before them, the land they had worked and nurtured for 4 decades. In the distance, lights glowed from Carter's house, where their grandchildren were probably being tucked into bed. Closer by, in the barn, horses nickered softly to each other. The familiar sounds of the ranch at night were as comforting as a lullaby. "I love you," Caleb said softly. "After all these years, after everything we have been through, I love you more now than ever. I love you too." Josephine leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly into the space that might as well have been made for her, forever and always. In the spring of 1935, Caleb fell ill. It started as a persistent cough that would not go away, then progressed to weakness and weight loss. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and ordered bed rest, but Caleb was too stubborn to stay down for long. "The ranch needs me," he insisted, trying to get out of bed despite Josephine's protests. "The ranch has Carter and a dozen capable hands," Josephine said firmly, pushing him back down. "What the ranch does not have is another you. Rest, husband. Let others handle things for a while." Reluctantly, Caleb obeyed. Carter and Samuel, who had returned home when he heard about his father's illness, managed the ranch operations. Clara came every day to help Josephine care for their father. The house was full of family again, though under circumstances none of them wanted. Slowly, with care and rest, Caleb recovered. By summer he was back on his feet, though he tired more easily than before and could not work the long hours he once had. "I am getting old," he admitted to Josephine one evening. He was 69 now, and while still strong, the years were catching up with him. "We both are," Josephine said. She was 62, her hair completely silver, her hands marked by decades of hard work, but her eyes were still bright, her love for him undimmed. That is all right. We have earned the right to slow down, to let others carry the load for a while. They settled into a new phase of life, one of leisure and reflection. They spent their days enjoying the ranch they had built rather than constantly working to expand it. They played with their great-grandchildren, passing on stories and traditions. They sat on their porch every evening, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. On their 45th wedding anniversary in 1938, the family threw them a massive celebration. People came from all over the state, former neighbors and old friends, many of whom had their own stories about how Caleb and Josephine had helped them over the years. "You two are legends," one old-timer said. "The mail-order bride and the lonely rancher who built an empire together." It is the kind of story people tell their grandchildren. That night, as they prepared for bed, Josephine opened the leather journal Caleb had given her so many years ago. It was nearly full now, pages and pages documenting their life together. She turned to a blank page and began to write. "Today marks 45 years since I married Caleb Quinn. 45 years of love, laughter, tears, and triumphs. 45 years of building something beautiful together. When I look back on that frightened young woman who stepped off the train with her dying sister, I barely recognize her. She was so lost, so desperate, but she was also brave, brave enough to take a chance on an unknown future. That bravery led her here, to this life, to this love. I have no regrets. Every choice, every hardship, every joy brought me to this moment, surrounded by family, wrapped in love, content beyond measure. If I could go back and do it all again, I would change nothing. Well, perhaps I would find a way to save Clara, to let her experience this happiness too. But everything else, I would keep exactly as it is. Caleb Quinn gave me the world. I only hope I have given him as much in return." She closed the journal and climbed into bed beside her husband. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, and they fell asleep as they always did, wrapped in each other's embrace. The years continued to pass gently. Caleb and Josephine celebrated their 50th anniversary in 1943, an achievement that warranted a feature in the local newspaper. Their love story, from mail-order bride to golden anniversary, captivated readers. They were interviewed and photographed, Caleb uncomfortable with the attention but indulging it for Josephine's sake. 50 years, he said during the interview. "It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. Time moves strangely when you are happy." "What is the secret to a long, happy marriage?" the reporter asked. Caleb and Josephine looked at each other and smiled. "Partnership," Josephine said. "We have always been partners, equal in our marriage. We respect each other, listen to each other, support each other." "And love," Caleb added. "Real, deep, abiding love. The kind that gets stronger with time rather than fading. That is what has carried us through everything." In the fall of 1945, as they celebrated Carter's 50th birthday, Josephine felt a deep contentment settle over her. She was 72 now, and Caleb was 80. They had lived long, full lives, had built something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children were successful and happy, their grandchildren were thriving, and their great-grandchildren were already making their own marks on the world. "We did well," she said to Caleb that night. "We did better than well." Caleb kissed her forehead. "We lived, truly lived, every day we were given. Not everyone can say that." On a mild spring day in 1946, Caleb suffered a heart attack while sitting on the porch. He died quickly with Josephine holding his hand, his children surrounding him. He was 80 years old and had lived every one of those years fully. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the life he had lived and the community he had helped build. Josephine stood dry-eyed through the service, her children on either side of her. She would grieve, deeply and thoroughly, but not today. Today was for celebrating Caleb's life, for honoring what he had built and the people he had loved. They buried him on the hill next to Clara's grave, under another cottonwood tree. Josephine stood at the graveside long after everyone else had left, speaking to her husband one final time. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for seeing me that day on the platform and deciding to take a chance. Thank you for letting Clara stay, for giving her a peaceful place to end her days. Thank you for 53 years of love and partnership. Thank you for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Thank you for this life, this beautiful, wonderful life we built together. I will miss you every day until we meet again, but I will not be sad. How can I be sad when I was blessed with so many years of love? Rest now, my darling. Rest and watch over our family. I will join you soon enough and we will be together again." Josephine lived for 5 more years, surrounded by her loving family. She continued to write in her journal, documenting the final chapters of her story. She played with her great-great-grandchildren, passing on stories about their great-great-grandfather and the ranch he had built. She sat on the porch every evening, talking to Caleb as if he were still beside her. On a warm summer evening in 1951, Josephine died peacefully in her sleep. She was 78 years old. They found her the next morning, a smile on her face, her hand stretched out as if reaching for someone only she could see. The family buried her next to Caleb, finally reuniting the couple who had loved so deeply. On the headstone, Carter had engraved, "Josephine Quinn, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She took a chance on love and built an empire." The Quinn Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations who never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of the mail-order bride who arrived with her sick sister, and the rancher who said there was room for both of them, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The journal Josephine had kept so faithfully was preserved and treasured, a written record of a love that had defied the odds and built something lasting. In its pages, future generations could read about their ancestors, about the courage it took to start over in a new place, about the power of love to transform lives. The house still stood on its hill, expanded and modernized over the decades, but still recognizable. The land was still worked, though now with modern equipment rather than the simple tools Caleb had used. The creek still ran clear, the cottonwood trees still provided shade, and the prairie still rolled endlessly toward the horizon. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the prairie grass, some claimed they could still see 2 figures sitting on the porch, hands clasped together, watching the sunset just as they had done for more than 50 years. Whether it was real or just the power of a love story so strong it refused to be forgotten, no one could say. But the Quinn family chose to believe their ancestors were still there, still watching over the land they had loved, still together in death as they had been in life. The mail-order bride and the rancher had taken a chance on each other, and from that chance had grown a family, a legacy, and a love story for the ages. It was a story of hope and new beginnings, of compassion and unexpected kindness, of love that grew from practical necessity into something transcendent. It was a story that proved sometimes the best things in life come from the chances we are brave enough to take, from the kindness we show to others, and from the love we allow into our hearts. And it all began with a simple act of generosity from a lonely rancher who looked at a desperate woman and her dying sister, and said 5 words that changed all their lives forever. "There is room for both."